Hello, Bagby Barracudas. Welcome to another art lesson. Today we are going to talk about how we paint and finish clay projects or ceramic sculptures or pottery at Bagby. Just a reminder, the process of making ceramics or clay pieces is a two-step process. The first step is to take wet clay and form it into a sculpture like the ones you see on the brown paper. Then when it's finished, it's left on shelves to dry for several weeks. And when they're dry enough, they go into the kiln, which is a super hot oven. This oven bakes the clay sculptures for half a day, and then it takes another entire half day to cool off enough so that the kiln or the oven can be opened and the projects can come out. And when they come out of the oven, they look like this. And these are hard, as you can see. They're breakable, like the plates and cups you might have at your house, right? We have different kind of projects here. We have some clay masks. We have some pottery. This is made of a different color clay, but it's hard, if you can hear. And it's rough right now because it hasn't been painted yet. We also have some sculpture projects at Bagby, and this is a girl. She's playing soccer or some kind of ball, and she has a ponytail here, and she's got her arms out to balance, and she's also hard and scratchy and still kind of rough because she's only done step one of the sculpture or ceramic project. After we've baked the pieces like this in the kiln, it's also called after the pieces have been fired in the kiln, we then paint them with a special kind of paint. Once they're painted, the paint's left to dry, and when the paint is dry, it gets a special top coat that makes it shiny. And finally, it goes back into the kiln or the oven, and it's baked for a whole half a day. Sorry, that's a very strange way to say that. It bakes for about half a day, and then it's so hot that it takes the other half of the day to cool all the way down so that it's safe to open up the kiln and take the finished pieces out. Here's a few examples of finished clay pieces that have been painted by Bagby students. So here we have a clay pot, ceramics. It's been painted with some purples and greens and blacks. It's got a nice pattern on it, right? You'll notice that the pattern is painted on, right? And the other thing you'll notice is that there is no paint on the bottom. What's special about the paint that we use, it's like a powder suspended in a liquid, so it's called a suspension. And when you bake the painted clay pieces after they dry, the powder in the paint fuses or it attaches to the clay and becomes a permanent part of the clay. If you paint on the bottom, what happens is the paint, or what's called the glaze, melts onto the shelf of the oven. So when we paint clay pieces, we always want to make sure that the back is completely clean. So see here, this one is this sculpture, this guy surfing here. He's got different color shirts. He's got his arms out. He's got his surfboard. So this guy here, notice that there's well, this is dirty, but it's not actually, I'm going to show you. This is not really permanent paint. This washes off, see? So this was when they painted this, they only painted the very top and did not paint the bottom, because if there was paint on the bottom, it would melt onto the shelf and it might stick to the shelf. So let's look at a few different things here. This is a mask that was made by a Bagby student. Again, notice there's it says sample. Maybe this was made by a Bagby parent. There's no paint on the back. Well, there's a little bit of color, but I tell you, it wipes off. So this has just gotten dirty over the years. But The paint was put on to where the grooves were carved. So we've got the nice hair, we've got different colors of paint for different skin tones, and we have, again, no paint on the back. Here's another one. We have a nice ceramic piece, clean on the back, and we've got the hair that's painted yellow. We've got a different skin tone here. We've got blue eyes, and painted the different parts of the face, and again, clean on the back. And here's one more. Oh, so, careful, these are breakable. Here is another clay pot done by a Bagby student. It's got designs carved on the outside. It has a design on the inside, and it has some really bright colors that were painted onto it. Okay, let me show you how we use these paints, because they don't work like regular paint. When you sit down to do your painting, you are going to get a set that looks like this. One thing you need to know about clay glazes or clay paint is that they look a little different in the jar and when they're wet than how they look after they go through the kiln or in the oven. Once they're baked in the oven, the colors become more bright or more vibrant. So when we give you a set of paints like this, we also give you color swatches. And this is a sample tile to show you what the colors will look like when you finish, after you paint them and when they come out of the oven. So let me show you an example. This is what the red looks like finished. And each one of these shows what one coat looks like on the left and what two coats looks like. And I'll show you how to do that. But let's show you, so here's the red. And I don't know if you can tell by looking at this in the camera, but this red looks kind of, I don't know, cloudy. It looks kind of chalky or pale. Here's another example of the green. The green's also a good example. This one here. See how it's like kind of pale and green, but when it looks like it's got a little white mixed into it, but it isn't. It's just that it needs to be fired in the oven. When it's finished, it has that color. So when you get your sets, you're gonna get a set of paints like this, plus your sample swatch. What you wanna do is put a brush in each pot, a small brush and a big brush in each pot. And the reason for that is these paints are kind of precious, and we do not want them to get mixed up. So we don't want students putting a paintbrush in the pot and rinsing it and then putting it in a different color. We want to use one paintbrush for one or two paintbrushes. They stay in the pot, you take it out of the pot, you use it to paint, and then it goes back in. And the reason for that is that way we can be sure that we don't accidentally paint some red or paint some black and then put it in the red paint to get red paint, because that way we won't ruin them. Because these are, as I mentioned, these paints are kind of precious, and we don't want to waste them or ruin them by mixing them accidentally with the other colors. Look at that, that worked perfect. So I got a small brush in each, and then we will put a bigger brush in each one. And I won't do all of them for this video, but you can see what I mean. A big brush and a small brush, so there's two brushes in each, and that's how you set up for your project. The next thing you need is a little cup of water, and you don't need a lot of water, and a sponge. And so I have a little bit of water here, and my sponge goes in it, and I'll show you how to use this. So let's move our paints off to the side, and let me pull out our project, and I will show you how to use these paints, because they work a little differently than some of our other paints that we've used. They're not like watercolors, and they're not like acrylics. They work a little bit differently. So let's say I want to paint this hair black. And so I'm going to pick a big brush, and I'm going to start painting. I'm going to make sure I cover the whole thing, and I got some on the face. Oh no. What am I gonna do? Well, let me show you. If you accidentally get paint where you don't want it, or you paint a color that you decide you don't like, the cool thing about these paints is that they wash off. So you want to take your sponge and squeeze a little water out, and you're just going to get the paint wet. And because it's a powder, when you put the paint, put water on it, it starts to move off of the clay. So see, there's a little bit left, but I'm going to cover that with another color, so it'll be okay. But see how you can move, whoops, big splash. You can move the paint off. And it's not perfectly clean, but if I can change my mind, I can fix that later, okay? So you have your, I'm gonna finish painting there so I can finish painting the black. And let's say I want to do, let's make some blue, or how about some brown eyes? The other thing you'll notice about the paint pots is that they have the color on the top, but they also tell you what color they are on the back. And there's a little color swatch giving you an example of what it should look like. So I'm gonna take a little paint here, and I don't need that much. But we're going to make this one give some blue eyes. Sorry, that is definitely not blue. How about brown eyes? Okay. I'm gonna do some more down into the groove. Okay. And then we're going to paint the whites of the eyes, which is right here, white. And what I'd like to tell you about the white is, yes, this clay here is kind of white colored, but when it's finished, it won't, if you don't paint the white onto it, it won't look or match all of them. So even though the paint is white, you want to paint this area white so that it will look finished. Otherwise, the clay will look raw or incomplete next to all the painted parts. Okay. So there we go. And let's see, let's do some lips. Why don't we, I think I want to outline the lips with a little bit of red and then paint them pink on the inside. And you can paint your mask or project however you like. Use your own creativity and your own ideas, and you can be creative. You can do lots of detail. I got a middle line here too. Okay, so that's just one layer, and what that means is just one layer of paint will be very light. Where is the pink? Here we go. This one's pink. And instead, let's see if I want, what if I want the inside of the lips to be a nice dark pink, so I can paint it more than once, a couple layers. So here's the inside of the lips. I'm gonna let it dry so then it looks kind of, it's shiny when it's wet, and as soon as it stops shining, you know it's dry. So like, see how these eyes, they've stopped shining? So then we could, if we wanted to make them extra dark brown, we could add another layer of brown paint, and then they'll be even deeper brown. So now see how that's kind of dry, it's not shiny anymore, and now when I paint it, it looks shiny again. Whoops, I got a little where I don't want it, so let's clean it off. I'm gonna squeeze the water out of my cup and just dab it away. And not all the color will come off, but if you just take enough of it off and there's a little stain, that's okay, you can paint over it. Okay, so when you do your piece, for example with the mask, let's make sure that you paint the entire top surface. Let's leave no part unpainted. Even this one, even though the clay is white, has the whites painted. And the whole piece is covered. Same here. This whole piece, there's paint everywhere. Okay, so here's an example of what I would show you. This, you can almost see, this definitely has 2 layers of paint. You see how deep and rich and brown this is? Right here, can you see this lighter bit on the face? This looks like 1 layer of paint. This here looks like a nice thick or double layer, 2 layers of paint. So I'm guessing the person who painted this painted the whole face except for the features, and then went back later and did another layer on top, and it looks like maybe they missed a spot. So for the best result, if you want it to be a more solid color, you want to paint it once, let it dry so it's not shiny anymore, and then paint it again. When you are finished with your painting and you're done using the paints, I want to make double, triple, quadruple sure that we save these paints and don't leave them to dry out. So we are going to remove all the brushes when we're finished, and no more of our classmates, all of our classmates are done using the paints. And we're not going to let these sit open because they dry out easily. Because I don't know if you noticed how fast the paint on the brown paint on the eye dried. Well, we don't want these to dry out. We want to be able to leave these for the next class and the next group of Bagby students who need to paint. So we're going to take all of our brushes out, and I would like you to be extra sure that the paints are closed. So we're going to push them down and you can hear them snap. Snap. Okay. Once you've closed all your pieces, you're going to leave your painted clay project back on the cart, and we will make sure they go back into the kiln to get fired for the last step. And when you get them back, they'll be nice and shiny and bright and colored. Thank you for doing art with me today, Bagby Barracudas. I hope this was a fun project, and I can't wait to see what you create.